Hello everyone and welcome to the last part of this exercise, the trim sheet tutorial. In this part, we're gonna go through a couple of different things. We're gonna be doing the texturing of the whole thing, dividing things into layers and cleaning things up to get a very nice, interesting effect until we get the final result for a trim sheet. Then we're gonna jump into Maya and I'm gonna show you all of the different things that you need to do to properly map not only straight surfaces like this little bridge section, but also curved surfaces like this little detail that we have on the center to make sure that we're utilizing our trim sheet in the best possible way. And finally, of course, we're going to be bringing the whole thing into Unreal. I'm going to show you how to set up the materials, and you're going to be able to do a quick test to appreciate all your hard work into creating this interesting trim for your environments. This has been quite the journey. We have other two parts where we did the initial blocking, the initial planning, as well as the sculpting process. If you haven't watched those, make sure to go back and watch them before you watch this. And with nothing else to add, let's go. Very well, my friends. So let's start with the texturing of this wall right here. And one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to delete all of the stuff that we had because we need to replan how we're going to be addressing all of the different elements that we have here. So one of the important things about trim sheets is the fact that we can, well, reuse them, right? Like we want to be able to use them several times. So what I want to do here is I want to use or have the bottom rocks be normal rocks, you know, a normal clay, brownish color. I'm going to have the top row be the jade one so that it's a little bit more special, right? Like a little bit of an accent. And we're going to have some gold information here on the other ones. I'm going to start with something simple. I'm going to use this rock face material here to drop it on top of everything. This is going to be sort of like my base color. And as we've mentioned before, most of the materials here inside of Substance 3D Painter will automatically tile. You can see right now we're using 3 tiles and we don't really see the repetition. Yes, there's that black spot right there. That can be a little bit obvious depending on the angle that you're watching it, but it's not that bad. I am going to go to the technical parameters and I'm going to bring the height range down. I don't want to have too much information there. And I'm also going to bring the color variation down. Remember, we've mentioned this before. We usually don't want to have too much variation happening with our elements, especially with this kind of like objects. We want to keep it sort of like very natural. Now, of course, I'm going to Control G to make this or get this into a group. I'm going to add a black mask and I'm going to be using right click and color selection. This is why we did the bakes in the other element to pick this one right here and this one right here. There's a little bit of an error right now that I'm having with my graphics card. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure why that is. Maybe a driver issue or something, but we need to just clean all of this up. There we go. So that's great because we're going to have this sort of like background color here. I do think it's a little bit too saturated, so I'm going to go with a more desaturated tone, something like that. Then I'm going to drop my jade material on top. I'm going to again add a black mask and right click, add a color selection to select my upper colors right here. So this trims, I'm going to use a small trim and a big trim right there to have as a jade material. Again, it doesn't mean like the fact that we're seeing the sheet this way doesn't mean that this is going to be the way that's going to be on the final elements. I'm going to get my old gold material, which by the way, you can get from our resources file in our Discord server. And I'm going to select some of the trims here. I want this green thing to be gold. I want one of the trims to be gold. And I kind of like this like jaggedy edge. So I'm probably going to make that jade as well. Once more, remember, this doesn't need to look nice by itself. This is something that we're going to be using to build other assets, okay? So even if things are not matching or we don't have like a great pattern right here, that's not a big deal because we're going to be able to change that once we start assembling our elements. I do feel like this guys right here deserve to be jade as well. So that whole trim is going to be jade. So there we go. As you can see, we got just the basic construction of these things. We can use them by themselves. We can use them with multiple elements. We can combine them. We're going to see this at the end of the video. But let's add a little bit more complexity because right now everything's looking a little bit too uniform. So the first type of complexity that I like to add is just some color variation. I'm going to grab just like an interesting red color right here. Nothing else, just color. I'm going to add a black mask. And for instance, let's try something simple as a clouds. So what this does, as you can see, is we can play a little bit with the contrast, maybe with the balance, and just set this to something like, I don't know, like a multiply or maybe like an overlay, right? Overlay, it's interesting because it gives us some interesting green elements right there on the jade. So I'm just going to tone this down. And what that is doing is pretty much just adding a little bit, again, like color variation and complexity to the whole thing. I definitely want to increase the tiling a bit, not too much, just so that we have like smaller or bigger elements. We can increase the contrast. There we go. Again, we should always keep these things very, very sort of like neutral. We don't want anything to be jumping straight at us. As you guys know, if you have access to your license here, if you're either a student, teacher, or you're paying the indie license, you should have access to all of the Substance 3D assets. So I'm going to grab this like a volcanic dirt. There we go. Now we're going to drop this on top of everything. Add a black mask, generator, and of course we're going to add a dirt generator. to get into the crevices and get a very interesting effect. I'm gonna tile this 2 more times because I feel like this is a little bit small. So I'm gonna go for a 2 tiling right here. There we go. So the pattern's a little bit smaller. And then this is very important. A very common issue with trim sheets is people want to add things like gradients, right? Like dirt on the bottom and then shiny stuff on the top. No. That's what you would do for a wall. Like on a wall, yes, that's the kind of stuff that you're gonna see. There's gonna be a little bit more grime and dirt on the bottom sections. You can see this in buildings outside. And there's gonna be usually a more faded effect on the top. But these things could be a wall, but they could also be a floor. They could also be a fountain or an arch. And because of that, we cannot add that kind of like a top to bottom like resolutions. It's again just general detail all over the place. This one I also like to set against something like an overlay, so it darkens a little bit more. It looks a little bit more, wet or humid or whatever. If you don't want to have too much color variation, you can set this to multiply. It's just going to darken it up. Play with the opacity a little bit. And very important, we need to break this up, right? Like this right now looks a little bit too contrasty and too obvious. So I'm going to add another fill layer right here. And the usual trick that I show whenever we're dealing with metal edgeware, again, another clouds. Let's do like a 3 tiling, increase the contrast quite a bit, play with the valence, and we're gonna multiply these clouds against the rest of the elements. Look at that. So now what that is doing, remember you can press Alt and click on the mask, what that is doing, it's breaking up the uniformity of the dirt. And we can play again, of course, with the contrast and the balance, depending on how little or how much dirt we want to have in our asset. In this case, I want to have a little bit more. Maybe the tiling is a little bit big. This is the magic of procedural workflows, right? The fact that we can always like change this kind of stuff and just find the best like result that we're going for. There we go. Now we're going to add, of course, a little bit of a metal edgeware. So I'm going to add a new layer here. This is going to be sort of like lightish, yellowish layer. I'm going to add a black mask. I'm going to right click, add a generator. I'm going to add, of course, our metal edgeware. That one's one of the magical ones, right? Before we blend it, I definitely want to add the fill, and we're going to add again our clouds. Let's try clouds 3 in this case. Increase the contrast, and again, multiply this. That's going to give us only a little bit of highlights on certain edges, not every single edge. This one, I'm going to set again to linear dodge. This one's a really good like blending mode to sort of like push values up. And I'm going to, of course, lower it so that we don't have too much information. Look at that. Beautiful, right? Really, really nice. So that's the metal edgeware. And as you can see, even though it's yellowish on the jade, it actually looks quite fine. So we're just going to roll with this. Now, the next thing that I want to modify is if I go to the channels, I really like the color channel. I think we have enough variation. I don't think we need to push it anymore. The height information is fine. The roughness is looking okay-ish, but we can definitely play a little bit more with that. It's looking a little bit too rough down here. It's actually not bad again. Normal map plus height map. Yeah, everything is looking fine, but I think a little bit of an extra detail might not be a bad idea. So I'm just going to add a new fill layer. I'm going to add a black mask, and I'm going to add a fill. And here on the fill, we're going to add the scratch generator. And then this one, we're going to push the height in. Now, the only thing with this one, again, scale. Scale is super, super important. So I'm going to push the tiling of the grunge information here to something like 4. So the scratches are small. See that? Like we want to have a little bit of a small scratch effect across the whole thing. Maybe a 3 if we want to make them a little bit bigger. Push the intensity a little bit more. Right? It's just going to be a nice little detail. And of course, we're also going to add a fill layer here with like a clouds or something to break it up because we don't want to have any of this information like be extremely obvious across the whole thing. Take a look at this and let's play with the valence. There we go. So high contrast, and there's just going to be a couple of scratches here and there and a couple of rocks. That's it. As you can see with this, my friends, we are generating a very nice trim sheet result. Now, the only thing that we need to do is export this element and start applying it to our meshes to get a nice result. So for export, we're going to say File, Export Textures, and we're going to be exporting this using the Unreal Engine preset, Unreal Engine Packed. I'm going to explain why this one is so good, and we're going to be using, of course, a PNG, and just hit Export. Remember, this is just a 2K texture, but with this 2K texture, we're going to be able to map everything into different surfaces very, very nicely. So let's jump quickly into Maya, and let me show you how this works. Now, before we continue, I know you guys are not subscribed. We have the information. So if you like these videos and you're learning, which is the most important thing, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. And let's continue. Once inside of Maya, the first thing I like to do is just set up my basic plane again to make sure that we have a clean reference on how this thing is going to look. Remember, this is 2 meters, right? 200 units on the centimeters or on the scale. That's 2 meters by 2 meters. Now, if you're using Substance, there is a plugin inside of Maya. It's the Substance plugin that we can use to create the map very, very easily. I'm just going to select the basic maps right here, grab my maps, hit select, and as you can see, it's finding most of them. Occlusion, roughness, metallic, normal, and base color. It's missing the metallic over here. I'll connect it manually. Hit apply. We go to the hypershade, select this standard surface, map it out, and there we go. So this is our normal map. Everything bumped to D. All of the information is properly plugged in. If you've never plugged materials before, we have videos about that. Don't worry. We'll call this trim sheet. This is our base color. Right now, we're not seeing the base color because we're missing a node here. The base color, even though it is connected, we're not seeing the connection, but it's connected because it's going through the ambient occlusion as well. Now, the important one is this one right here. This is the occlusion roughness metallic. So as you can see right now, it's connecting it wrongly because it's connecting only the roughness channel. I'm going to delete that right there. Open the elements right here, the channels, RGMV. R is our ambient occlusion. We don't have it right now, so we're not going to use it. G is our roughness. So this is going to go to specular roughness right there. And B is our metalness right there. Grab this guy, right click, assign existing material, and we can assign the trim sheet. Press number 6, of course, to see it, and there we go. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but if you insert a skydome light here inside of Arnold or inside of Maya, and you add your traditional AXR that we normally use, and press number 7 on your keyboard, you will see the resolution. You will see the actual material. It's not going to look super pretty, to be honest, but like Viewport 2.0 gives you a nice idea of how this thing is going to look. One more interesting bit of information here is the scale of your HDR can be 0. So you're not going to see it on the background, and you're still going to be able to see this thing right here. So there we go. As you can see, we have the information right there. It's working nicely, and we get a preview of how this thing is going to look. We're going to see this inside of Unreal in just a bit, but this is just a very basic preview. So why are trim sheets so important? We've been talking a lot about them, but yes, of course, we can make a wall, right? Like if we just duplicate this thing and keep going, we're going to be able to make a wall, but we can make so many more things with this. So let's start with a very basic poly modeling section right here. I'm going to model a little bit of a bridge, okay? So let's start with this cube right here. I'm gonna make it a little bit wider, something like that. There we go. And because I'm very lazy, I just want to model half of this. So we're gonna start right here. We don't need these faces for now. Let's delete them. And let's just start like very basically, very sort of like blocky, construct an interesting sort of like silhouette right here. Create like a little bit of a channel right there. There we go. Now, if we want to be super precise, one of the things that we can do here is just make sure that this thing matches with the grid. That way, when we connect this or attach this to any sort of like element, things are just gonna like flow perfectly fine. So for instance, this thing right there. Now, of course, to make things just a tiny bit nicer, we could, for instance, bevel this borders a little bit right there. Right, like maybe even 2 segments and a small fraction. So this could potentially be a extremely huge bridge, right? Like that covers a lot of area. If we try to do a traditional like texturing process or approach with this thing, it would be impossible, right? Like it would take way too much resources. So what do we do? How do we manage this? Well, we use trim sheets, and it's very simple. I'm gonna assign this element. I'm just gonna right click and assign the existing material. So the material trim sheet right there. And then I'm gonna grab one face. Let's say this one right here. And I want this face to be this like bricks right here. So I'm just gonna do UV, planar mapping, and we're gonna do a planar mapping in this case from the y-axis, from top to bottom. There we go. So now if I go to the UVs of this element, we're gonna have this face. I can turn this on to see the image, and we can just rotate this face. I'm gonna go here to transform, and I rotate this precisely 90 degrees, and just position this where it's supposed to be. So right there, okay? So as you can see, the UVs are right there on the border of the element, right around there. And I can grab the other UVs, the ones on the bottom, and just like map them here on the bottom section. I know I'm stretching the UVs a little bit, no big deal, because what we're gonna have now is this thing right here mapped onto the element, right? So eventually, if we mirror this thing, I'm just gonna Control D, mirror it, and rotate it around, we are gonna have this stones generating the whole path. And we do the exact same thing with other faces. For instance, this one, we apply the element, the rotation, we apply the UV map, we rotate this, and we decide, okay, what do we want to have on that little detail? Well, what about the gold little trim that we have right here? And then we go here, and we just scale it and get it in that position, right? We cover the specific area that we want right there. And there we go. Our trim sheet is now properly placed right there. This guy's right here, same principle. We just do a planar mapping from the top. We grab these guys, rotate them 90 degrees, and we find a specific piece that we want. Maybe, again, this jade feature right here. And we can increase the resolution of the map, right? Like we can always scale things up and down. There we go. Grab this one right here. There we go. Go right there. And the cool thing is, since this thing measures exactly 1 point, we can actually sort of like tile them. Because right now, if we take a look at the element, both of the lines are perfectly aligned, right? We have the little line right there and the little line right here. If we don't want that, what we can do is just grab one of these guys and just move it a little bit. At any point, like we can actually leave it right there on the border, right? Like where one of the pieces meets. And because this thing is exactly one tile, it's going to tile perfectly. Now, what you want to do is, since these are tile sheets, you want to make sure that the borders are as clean as possible. You can see that the border right there is looking a little bit weird. Let's go back to like number 6 mode. And you can see that the border is too obvious. Like the breakpoint is too obvious right there. So that means that one of this, it's this one, it seems it's a little bit like further downward than it should. I'm gonna grab this one right here, just push it a little bit further up. So we get a little bit of that brown color, a little bit of that dirt, right? And that blends a lot better with that little shape right there. So let me quickly grab all of these places right here, all of these faces, and show you how it would look with all of the trim sheets like properly placed on this thing. Now, this is an interesting section right here. I want to incorporate this element, right? The little like a pattern that we have here on the side walls. But as you can see, it's looking a little bit too stretched. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to stretch the UV. I'm stretching it here on my UV editor. I'm gonna stretch the UV until it gets to maybe like 1.5 or 2 elements. But we need to make this sort of like very mathematical, because otherwise things are not gonna trim when we like duplicate this bridge. I'm gonna go here to the scale function. I'm gonna remove the V option. I'm just gonna scale 2 times. And as you can see, that's gonna give me something that's a lot more interesting. And I also scale it so that we get a little bit of the gold trim. I feel like that's gonna look interesting. We're to try to get to the little border there, to the union of the pieces. And there we go. I feel like I actually need to grab this element, and I'm just gonna redo it because it's looking a little bit weird with that corner. As you can see, this mapping is from the x-axis. We need to flip the UV so that it's proper here. And now first I'm gonna scale here on the x-axis to capture the area, the range of the elements properly. And then I'm gonna use the scale on the U element right there. That gives me a proper distribution of the whole thing. We do another planar mapping on this final island that we have right here. Again, we can try like move it around so it's not perfectly symmetrical. We could even rotate it all the way so that we get like the opposite direction, and that way we sort of like mirror or hide a little bit of the elements. And that's it, my friends. That's pretty much all we need to do for straight lines. So whenever you're building, again, a wall, a section, or this kind of stuff, this is very, very easy to do. And once more, if I were to duplicate this thing and tile it, no one is going to be able to tell where the trim starts and where the trim ends. And you can have a extremely big like a building right here, or in this case a bridge, and no one's going to be able to know this. But that's not all. We can do a couple more things here. So one of the very cool things about trim sheets is that we can actually use them on circular objects, on our arcways, on curves, or anything. And it's a great way to like break up the patterns, right? So what if I include, for instance, here a cylinder? Doesn't have to be on the grid or anything in this particular case. I just want to have a cylinder here on the center of this bridge. I'm gonna delete the bottom faces, push them so they're snapped to the center of the grid right there. I'm gonna grab this one, push it in a little bit, generate like a little bit of a cap. I'm gonna select this vertex, Control F11, Control E, push it in, and then Control E again, and then just push it in and create this like the round thing right there. There we go. Now this one right here, we can snap it to the ground and we get this thing right here. To be honest, I'm tempted to give this cylinder a little bit more roundness because it's looking a little bit too faceted. So I'm just gonna bevel all of the edges, push the fraction quite high. Again, not perfect, but it's gonna give us close to what we want. So if we grab this thing right here and we also do a UV mapping, I'm gonna do a planar mapping from the Z-axis, hit apply, and then I'm gonna cut the edges here. And then what I want to do is I just want to grab the exact same thing that we have right here, jade and gold, right? To have like a little bit of a detail or like a trim here inside of the walls. The problem is, of course, if we take a look at the editor, the UV that we have right now is horrible. This is not going to work. So what I need to do is I need to straighten this. And there's a couple of ways to do it. I'm just going to show you one right here. First, I'm going to cut this thing on one side, like right there. And then I'm going to Control U and Control L to just lay this out. And as you can see, we have this super curved element. So I need to grab one of the edges, and I'm going to go here to the options where the unfold option is. I'm going to say straighten shell. And as you can see, this is going to straighten the shell into this element right here. Once this is straightened, I can grab this thing and just straighten the edges on every single element. And as you can see, we're going to get a super sort of like uniform distribution of the UVs. It's a very common technique that we can use for this thing. I'm going to assign the trim sheet right here. And of course, on my UV map, I need to make sure that this fits with the element perfectly. So I'm going to push this up and match it right here. Now, right now, it's very easy to match this to the gold trim, to the gold section, which is going to be right around there. I'm talking about the center like part, right? Like that's the part that we want to see right there. I'm going to grab this edge right here and I'm going to cut it. So I'm going to cut the edge, and this whole shell, I need to push it and place it on the gold trim. That is going to be the gold trim right there. And I need to do the same thing with the other side. I'm going to grab that edge as well, cut it too. Now this UV shell, we also need to map it to this section right here. Map that one right there. Perfect. So as you can see now, our element, yes, it has the information that we want, right? But we need to do a couple of fixes here. The problem is, or one of the main problems, is that we are not getting the proper, well, distribution of the faces, right? So even though this island right here is mapped to this section right here, we need to tile it a little bit more. So the first thing I need to do, I need to make sure that this island is touching perfectly to the sides of the element, because if I try to tile this or expand this, it's not going to work. I need to go here to the tools, and there's one very cool tool called normalize. So I'm going to normalize only on U. I'm going to hit click, and as you can see, that's going to push the borders so that they match the U direction right there. And now I can go back here to the scale and maybe say, hey, I want to scale this 4 times again on the U axis, and boom, this is going to map it to 4 times along the axis right there. And look at that. We get this very, very nice effect right here. I know that right now it looks like a little bit ugly because we don't have any like shading, like proper shading with metalness and anything, but it will look very, very nice. The only thing is, let's make sure to correct those little bumps that we have on our element. This one I'm actually gonna sort of like move it around a little bit so that it's a little bit offsetted from the other one, and the lines are not perfectly aligned. And it seems like it's this one that's touching the jade area a little bit. So I'm just gonna go to my UVs, grab all of the top UVs right here, just push this thing down a little bit more. There we go. Much better. Now this one, the gold does seem to have a little bit of contamination as well. You can see a little bit of that green color right there. So let's grab the UV shell, this one right here. See where it is. Yeah, it's touching the bottom section there a little bit. Same deal, just grab the UVs, just on that island right there. And I'm just gonna push them up a little bit. Always checking the model and checking the textures. Now, let's bring all of this into Unreal. I'm just going to call this cylinder trim, and I'm going to combine both of these elements into a single one, so it's easier to manage. And we're going to call this bridge trim. Now, so far, yes, this looks interesting, but we're inside of Maya. The light here is not great, and we can definitely make this thing look a little bit nicer. So let's take this into Unreal, and let's set up the material first of all, so that we can get a nice result. So I'm setting up a new level here inside of Unreal, and the only thing I need to do is bring in my textures. I need the base color, occlusion roughness metallic, normal, and that's pretty much it. And of course, we need our trim examples. Now, before we connect anything here, this one right here, make sure to disable sRGB so that the colors are done the proper way. And we can jump into this trim sheet right here and just fill in the materials very quickly. This is the color information. This is the normal information. This is the ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic. Hit save. And there we go. Because these elements were brought in from Maya, the elements or the colors are going to look perfectly fine. And the only thing I need to do is just drop this in the world. Look at that. Great stuff, right? And again, we can break in this little like trim as well. Position it in the proper location. There we go. And look at how much texture information we're able to capture with these things without the need to do it individually for each element. We can do it again here, just duplicate it. I'm gonna make sure that I have my grid enabled, and I'm gonna duplicate this thing. And as you can see, I should be able to match it perfectly to the grid right there. Do it again. For instance, this one right here. Okay, let's duplicate it one time. Now let's grab all of the elements, duplicate them all. There we go. So as you can see, look at how much distance we're covering with just trim sheets. And even though the model is super basic, right? Super blocky, we're able to generate a lot of detail that looks amazing here inside of the game. Let's quickly test it, then there we go. This is what we could expect to see, right, if we were playing a game. And as you can see, yes, the repetition can be noticeable, especially if the area is very long. But if you start incorporating other things, such as effects, or things like decals, or a little bit of vertex painting, there are ways to blend all of this information into something that looks even nicer. So this is it, my friends. This is the end of this little series. I know this was a topic that you guys were asking for. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a lot of stuff along the way. If there's something that I want you guys to remember, is how powerful it is to use a trim sheet to map so many surfaces, right? Even in this very low poly element, to map them and create so much complexity. These are super basic low poly elements that have a lot of texture resolution, and we can duplicate them and tile them as many times as we need to create or generate a complete environment or complete structures. We already saw them, how they can very easily be brought into an engine and utilized in such a way that they generate more visual interest. And there's so many more complex shapes that you can do. Again, curvatures, arcs, floor, walls. Trim sheets, if you know how to use them, can be used to make a lot of different things. They even have used them to create complete props. If you make trims out of wood or metal elements, you can build a bench, you can build a chair. They did this for The Last of Us, if I'm not mistaken, and you can build so many different assets very optimally with just basic basic structures like this trim sheets right here. Now, if you enjoyed the series, if you like this content, if you learned something new, the best thing you can do, of course, is help us with a like, a share, and subscribe here on the channel. It really helps us. We're really close to the next big milestone, which is going to be the 100,000 subscribers. We hope to get there, well, eventually, hopefully in the next couple of years, if possible. So yeah, anything helps, my friends. Thank you very much for your support. Please do the exercise. I'm talking to you. You finished this series. You've watched over 1.5 hours of content about trim sheets. Now you need to put it into practice and do your own version of them. That's pretty much it, my friends. If there's something else that you would like me to cover about this topic, please let me know. And with nothing else to add, don't forget, always learning, always improving. I'll see you back on the next one.